There's 5 key things I wish I knew about getting abs when I first started training. These are also the 5 keys that I've taught our clients to help them get abs a lot easier. I've been coaching people just like yourself for over a decade now, and the first thing to note, it's probably the most frustrating one, is understanding genetics. So once you can see your abs, how they actually look and where they sit is purely genetic, and there's nothing you can do to change the actual position of them. Now what I mean by that is, as you can see by these photos, some people have those perfectly aligned just six-pack abs where it's like 2, 4, 6. And then other people, unfortunately, like myself, abs don't line up perfectly straight like that. They're almost like one sits higher than the other. So it's like 2, 4, and sometimes you can't even see the bottom 2. In my case, you can see the top 4 a lot more predominantly than the bottom 2. Now again, just to reinstate that, that is purely genetics. And if there is videos out there saying you can do that, which there was when I first started, definitely don't believe them because it's just bullshit. But the good news is, combined with genetics, your abs also become a lot more visible depending on the amount of muscle mass you have, which is something that you can change. For example, someone like Eddie Hall has visible abs right here despite not having very low levels of body fat and being absolutely shredded. But on the other hand, we have our client Tom and also Alex, who when they first started, as you can see, by no means at all are they fat, but you also can't see the abs either. Now fast forward 12 and 16 weeks later, you can clearly see the ab definition a lot better. And that's simply just because we lost a little bit of body fat, although they didn't have much to begin with. We put a lot of emphasis on building more muscle overall, and of course, a bit of emphasis on building the actual ab definition up themselves, which we're about to touch on. Which leads us to the second thing, and that is, I wish I put more emphasis on ab training and developing my abs, and didn't just listen to the abs are made in the kitchen advice. Because although it is true to an extent, and we will get to that, if you don't train your abs properly and they're not well developed, you won't be able to see them very well, despite not being fat, like we just spoke about with Alex and Tom. And when I first started training, I did minimal ab training. If I did throw it in, it was very random and sporadic, and I had shitty ab development. And to actually see my abs, I had to get very lean, and it wasn't sustainable. And even then, when I did get lean, they still weren't very well developed, and they didn't look anywhere near how I wanted them to. And that's purely because I just didn't put any emphasis or enough emphasis on training them properly. I'm also a big fan of the saying, success leaves clues. And if we look at some of the strongest people in the world, strongmen, powerlifters, they all have very solid midsections and can see abs at higher levels of body fat. And again, that's just because they have so much pure muscle mass. So the abs are very well developed that you can see them despite not being, 8% body fat. I also try to remind myself that why leave any stone unturned? Abs are a muscle group just like any other muscles, so we should train them just like we train any other muscle group if we want them to be developed. The third thing I wish I knew is the way I actually trained my abs. Like I said, it was very unconventional, sporadic, not consistent at all. And now I do believe my abs have gotten better. They still got a long way to go, but they are much more developed because I treat them like any other muscle group. Of course, keeping in mind that because your abs get indirectly hit with a lot of other movements, especially your big compound movements like squats, even pressing and stuff like that, they need less volume, but I still like to hit them properly. For me, this is about 3 to 4 working sets twice a week. So 6 to 8 hard working sets per week, proper ab training going close to failure. For me, I found that's all I really need. Now, I would like to slowly ramp that up, but again, you have to keep recovery in mind. And if you're doing that and your abs are always sore and it's taking away from some of your other bigger movements, like squats, pressing, things like that, then maybe pull back a touch. Now, in terms of actual exercise selection, that is another big mistake that I used to make. And honestly, all the Instagram style crazy circus shit you see, I would avoid that. I did that, it did nothing, and just stick to your basics. So for me, a couple of basics would be, I like to have something where we pull from the top down, so like a cable crunch, and then something where we pull from the bottom up, like a decline leg raise or just a general hanging leg raise. And of course, if the hanging leg raises are too hard, you can always regress them to a supported leg raise and then even a floor leg raise if you needed to. When it comes to picking your exercises for your ab training, just keep it simple, and you want to make sure that you can efficiently load it. So whether it's like a cable crunch where you can easily progress in weight or reps, or something like a hanging leg raise where you are using your body weight, but you can progress it in reps and difficulty, going from a supported leg raise to a hanging leg raise and stuff like that. When I seem to struggle and plateau on these and I can't add any more reps or more weight, I also just slow down the eccentric. That makes it harder as well. Moral of the story, don't overcomplicate your ab training. It doesn't need to be crazy. It just needs to be simple, basic, and effective. The fourth thing I wish I knew, and this is something we talk to our clients about quite often, is getting abs actually worth it to you? And in my experience, this is simply where having good expectations of how hard it will be to get abs depending on where you start, and also just what's needed to get there. If you have those expectations laid out, it's gonna be a lot easier. And then you can also decide if it's actually worth it to you or not. Because you need to keep in mind, for some people with below average genetics or even average genetics, it's gonna be harder to get lean enough to see your abs and have well-developed abs than someone with great genetics. And often on social media, the people with the great genetics, they pretty much rise to the top, and that's all you're gonna basically see in your feed. So it's gonna eventually feel like that is the norm, that's how you should look, or that's how you can easily get there, depending on how some people display it. But for majority of people, it's not the case. Now, I don't ever say that to discourage you from trying to get abs and really pushing for it. If it is a goal and something you've always wanted to achieve, then 1000% push for that goal and make it happen, because it is doable. Everyone has abs, everyone is born with abdominal muscles. Just depends on where you're starting from and your genetics of how hard or not hard it will be for you to get there and also stay there. So if you're not an absolute genetic freak and you haven't had abs your entire life, then for you to get abs, it's gonna take a few things. The first, of course, is a solid fat loss phase. Now, how long that fat loss phase will be completely depending on your starting point and how much body fat and weight you have to lose to get those abs. The second is, of course, just full consistency and compliance. Trying to get lean enough to get abs is not something you can do for a few weeks and then take a couple weeks off, and then you try again for a month and then take 3 weeks off, go on holiday, etc. And of course, in that fat loss phase, it's important to note that this will usually come with some hunger, some cravings, and of course restricting some social events and eating out less, drinking less alcohol, and all the fun shit that you like doing is gonna have to be minimized quite a bit. Now, that's not to say you can't do that stuff still and enjoy yourself from time to time, but it is gonna have to be minimized to get abs. Again, for 99% of people. To give a rough guideline of how long it might take, I'll use some of our own client examples here for you, and I'll put the exact time frame of how long it took them to get there. And all of our clients experience those things we just spoke about to different degrees. But the main consistent factor amongst all of them is they wanted to push for it, they knew what to expect, and they loved the journey. They loved the process of going through a shredding fat loss phase. They love the process of training and going to the gym. They don't mind the process of dieting, and they just enjoy it as a whole. And I'm exactly the same. I love training. I love going through different phases, whether it be a fat loss phase, a muscle gaining phase, sometimes a maintenance/lifestyle phase. If you enjoy the process, it's gonna be 10 times easier. If you hate training, you hate dieting, you hate counting calories, you hate sticking to a meal plan, you've got a lot of body fat to lose, it's gonna be 100 times harder for you. And that might not be what you wanna hear, but at least it's the truth. Right? I think that's helpful. And that of course leads us to number 5, which is fat loss. Definitely the most obvious and the most important one to think about of everything we just went through. You have to lose enough body fat and be lean enough to see your abs, and there's just no other way around it. Of course, do everything else we just spoke about, keep that in mind, but at the end of the day, you have to lose enough body fat to see those abs. Like I said, everyone will be a little bit different. As a general guide, for most guys, you're gonna need to get to about 15% body fat or less, depending on genetics, how much muscle mass you have. But as a rough guide, when we see people get to 15% body fat and less, that's when the abs start to really pop. Now, of course, to lose the body fat, you need to be in a calorie deficit, you need to be consistent with your fat loss phase, and if you have no idea where to start or what to do for that, I'll pop a video here teaching you step by step how to lose that body fat.